I don't have an opening joke for this one. Let's just get started. It's gonna be hard enough to get through as it is. So this movie opens with a sweep over Antarctic ice while the opening credits play, and I kept thinking it was about to end and get to the actual movie, but it just keeps going. Like the music crescendos 7 or 8 times during the course of this 3-minute opening scene. I nearly forgot what I was watching. We finally make it to these 3 scientists cutting out ice cores for analysis, and apparently they're down about 26 feet when the ice suddenly breaks, and this guy risks his life to jump the gap and save the ice cores, because apparently, clearly, there's just no other way to obtain new samples of ice deep below the surface. Clearly that isn't possible. I can't think of a single way they could possibly get new samples of deep ice from this area. Not one. We then smash cut to a climate conference in New Delhi, where the movie does its best to speed run the stereotype gauntlet and dump some exposition on us regarding the upcoming plot. Once that's over, we again smash cut to a random street in Japan, where some of the dialogue was clearly dubbed in post because the speech doesn't match their mouth movements at all, and it's delayed by almost a full second. Maybe it was an homage to old dubbed Japanese cinema, but I highly doubt it. Anyway, a massive hailstorm starts, kills a couple people, and we again smash cut to a home where the movie instantly makes me realize how old I am because Jake Gyllenhaal's playing a 17-year-old student instead of one of the scientists like I had subconsciously expected. Turns out his dad is one of the climate scientists who predicted this whole thing, and we'll be spending a lot of time with both of these characters, so be ready for that. Smash cut again to space. This movie has a lot of plates spinning, doesn't it? Where we get even more exposition about the upcoming plot, ending with, you guessed it, another smash cut. This time to Gyllenhaal's character, Sam, eating a ton of peanuts on a plane when some turbulence causes some mayhem on board. Yeah, they don't really go anywhere with this, so let's just move on. Fast forwarding through the boring bits and spoon-fed exposition, because trust me, there is a lot of it, we end up in New York, where we get a nice mini lecture about pollution from a guy with a shopping bag on his head.
People and their cars and their exhaust, and they're just polluting the atmosphere.
Anyway, Sam and his friends are competing in some school competition when the whole city ends up flooding. I love this scene where a woman's trapped in a car, but she's only trying to get it through the one door that's blocked, and they clearly have enough room to push that cab forward a few feet to get that door open. Also, the girl runs back to grab the woman's bag out of the car after rescuing her and somehow doesn't see the 50-foot wall of water rushing her way until Sam points it out. Eventually, the group ends up finding safety in a library with a small group of survivors, and Sam tries to get to a payphone to call his dad since the cell signals are dead. I love how you can clearly see water get in the phone, but it doesn't stop working until the water covers the whole thing instead of just the electrical compartments. We also get to have a little moment here between Sam and, wow, I cannot remember her name. The girl, as she tries to help him get dry and warm.
What are you doing?
I'm using my body heat to warm you. If we let the blood from your arms and legs rush back to your heart too quickly, your heart could fail.
I assure you that is not where the blood is rushing. Eventually, everything freezes over outside, in like a matter of hours, and girl person ends up with blood poisoning from a cut in her leg that she got while saving the woman stuck in the car, and the 3 boys have to go get antibiotics from a derelict rushing barge that just happened to float into the street while fighting off these random, terrible CGI wolves that escaped from a zoo a little ways away, and who for some reason decided to beeline for the barge rather than go after the several hundred people clearly shown walking through the streets. They also get chased by freezing? No, seriously, this is the most ridiculous shit. They have to outrun cold air, and it follows them down halls and shit. It's remarkable that this made it past the first draft. Speaking of things that should have ended up on the cutting room floor, we have these 2 subplots about Sam's mom working in some hospital with a terminally ill kid, and a team of researchers trying to stay up to date on what's happening. And there's this odd moment where the mom tells this kid he's being really brave, and he says thank you.
Thank you.
And then they cut to one of the researchers handing another a cup of coffee, and she says thank you with the exact same tone and inflection.
Thank you.
And I couldn't figure out why it stuck with me as much as it did. But I think I figured it out. There's this thing in filmmaking called double editing, and essentially it's a technique to tie together seemingly unrelated scenes in a way that makes narrative sense so that one informs or finishes the other. For example, you could have a character about to be attacked by someone or something, and right before they get hit, cut to someone hitting a baseball or something with a heavy impact sound. This way you can move on to a completely different and almost entirely unrelated scene, but the two feel naturally entwined because the action and sound from the second feels like a metaphor for what's happening off-screen in the first. This movie doesn't have that. In fact, it barely has any editing at all, and I think this was an attempt at pulling off some double editing without having any real idea of how and why it works. Anyway, the subplots really don't get any attention in this movie at all. They're basically just kind of there without actually being involved in the plot at all, which coincidentally is exactly how I felt as an audience member. Yeah, this movie actually sets up a bunch of things that don't go anywhere and eventually just settles down on just the library survivors and Sam's dad trying to make it to them. Eventually he does, and somehow immediately after, everything just magically fixes itself. The movie basically ends by writing its message on a brick and bashing you in the head with it while screaming, "Do you understand our very nuanced and easily missed moral? Do you? Stupid!" By having the vice president give a speech on global warming and how we should have open borders just in case the world is freezing over and we have to escape? I wasn't aware that the climate of southern United States and northern Mexico were all that drastically different, or that catastrophic weather patterns obeyed national borders, since I thought borders in general were artificial distinctions put in place by humans' ingrained sense of tribalism that nature couldn't give less of a shit about, but hey, do your thing, I guess. In all seriousness, there is no subtlety here, and it comes off as bizarrely insincere. I don't doubt the people behind this film had good intentions, but it's all handled so ham-fistedly and with so little nuance that no matter which side of the fence you're on, you're gonna have a hard time taking any of it seriously. If anything, I think this movie probably had the opposite of the intended effect, because by the end I was burning a big pile of oily rags and old hairspray cans in my yard hoping to kickstart the apocalypse so that I wouldn't ever have to watch shit like this again. To be clear, because this is the internet where everyone is known for their rational behavior and logical thought processes, it's not the message of the movie I had an issue with, it's how it's handled. After its release, this film was blasted by both sides of the climate change debate, and I can totally see why. I think the real moral of this story is that an important message, incompetently handled, can do far more damage than good, and this is some of the most incompetent handling since Mr. Hitler's attempt at using a condom. You know what's a great set of films about global warming? Mad Max, because it's all in the background instead of being the core focus, and that really is the best way to make this kind of point without coming on too strong, and if you're not interested in that side of it, it still works incredibly well as just an entertaining series of movies that can be watched and enjoyed all on their own. Yeah, I really have no idea why this movie did so well. I mean, it has some impressive visuals and some pretty cool shots, and most of the effects still hold up well, that weird plasticine CGI wolves notwithstanding, but it's really not much more than a paper-thin soapbox for someone who wanted to say something important without having the skill required to say something interesting. You know, a bit like this review. The acting is also really bad. Basically everyone but Sam and Bag Hat Guy sound like they're in a grammar school play, and the juxtaposition of good acting next to horrible acting makes it come off as even worse.
I think the young lady is right, sir.
What is this nonsense?
It's not.
Nietzsche was a chauvinist pig who was in love with his sister.
Wolves! They're gone!
I am 100% positive most of these people didn't even audition. They were just pulled in from grocery stores and shit near where the shoot was happening. At the end of the day, it's a clumsy mess of a movie that fumbles everything it set out to do in the worst possible way, like holding a seminar on the importance of proper hydration on the deck of a sinking cruise liner. Anyway, I've still got some diesel fuel and plastic containers to burn, so thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time.